Good morning. Welcome to this morning's webinar on shrink management. Myself, Amy Toner, and Darren Schulte are your hosts. We're really excited about all the registrants we've gotten. Everyone's lines are muted. Please submit your questions via the chat section, and Darren will answer them at the end of the presentation. Also, today's presentation is being recorded and will be posted on NATSO's website. Now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Darren.
Thank you, Amy, and welcome everybody and good morning. Thank you for attending today's shrink webinar. We'll get started right away. So first and foremost, my name is Darren Schulte. For those of you on the call who do not know me, I'm the Vice President of Membership for NATSO, and I've been in the industry closing in on 30 years. What we're going to learn today is just 12 very simple daily tasks that every store should be doing at a minimum to help reduce shrink in their locations. And also we're going to talk about the importance of shrink, especially as we move into a market where things are getting tighter and tougher to make in other areas from profitability standpoints, such as fuel margins and so forth. So why shrink is super important to be part of your net operating cost control program. Then as a reference, we'll talk about the 12 actionable shrink controls that you do on a daily basis and why they're important. And for those of you that will probably ask if there is additional, more detailed training available from NATSO, and the answer is yes. If you would like me to come out and perform either individual training for your store manager or your store managers, as has been the case, or even for your employees, we certainly can do that, and you're free to shoot me an email and set something up. And then we'll end with questions, and as I referenced, again, thank you for joining us, and we'll get started. So for those of you on the call today and that haven't really been thinking about shrink control as much as you have in the past, my question to you, why is shrink so important to improving profitability? And it's actually very, very simple. It's money, plain and simple. And when we spend a lot of time and energy trying to fix this problem or fix that problem, many times we forget about the simple things that we can do, which I call controllables. Now, certainly shrink is not simple to fix, but it is a controllable. It is an item within your operation that you, your managers, and your employees have complete control over. It is a controllable item. And the bottom line is it's money. So if it's going out your store and not being paid for, or if it's going out your store into one of your employees' pockets, it's money that's being taken away from your business. So to get you all in the right frame of mind, I want you to think about this. And this is really important as it applies to how one controls shrink. So first and foremost, have you ever broken the law yourself? Did you do it by chance today? Those of you who drove to work, did you speed? And if you did speed, you broke the law. And why this is an important aspect of shrink control is many folks that struggle with shrink control cannot believe that people are stealing from them. Or more importantly, they cannot believe that their employees are stealing from them or their managers are stealing from them. There's a tendency to believe, well, I don't steal, so I can't believe other people are stealing from me. So you really have to get past that point. Most of us break the law once or twice a week, and many of us do things that may not be the best things. So our employees are dealing with those types of issues every single day. So come to the grips and understand that shrink control has to do with your employees primarily, and yes, indeed, unfortunately, those folks will be stealing from you. Next piece of the puzzle is not a political statement, but it's also very important to understand is, again, have you ever stolen anything in your life? Would you steal if your children were on the brink of starvation? And again, why this is so important to understand is every day a lot of our employees make very, very difficult decisions. Do they steal from the company that they assume is making millions, if not billions of dollars in their mind? Or do they just let their children starve because they're making wages that for many cases are below poverty lines? And again, not a political statement. It's just an understanding of that's what we deal with in our industry. The cashiers see thousands and thousands of dollars coming through their registers. And if we're not doing a good job explaining it to them what the cost is to running a business, if they're not familiar with, maybe as an example, $100 goes through their register, but there's only 2 to 3 cents of profitability when it's all said and done, you're going to have some particular strong issues when it comes to shrink control. So number one, let's talk about number one. What's one of the first things that you can do to control shrink and a daily thing? Is have your stores walk their stores. This is a simple thing that in my 200 plus visits of operators in the last 2 years, I don't see happening very frequently. Just by walking your store in the morning, in the shift, if you have a manager coming in and then an assistant manager coming in or a third shift manager coming in later on, assist that they walk the store together, or at a minimum, assist that someone walks that location. It's a very simple way to understand what's happening in your business. You're going to pick up on things the more often that you walk into your store. And it has many other carryovers to whether or not your pumps are dirty or the outside of your store is dirty, or are there people loitering around. There are significant other positive reasons why walking the store is important. But it's important to, at a minimum, walk your store before and after the shift. And if you can walk your store frequently during the day, that's even a better positive for you. Again, simple to do, easy to do, not happening very often. Number two, ensure employees are spending time on the sales floor with customers. Again, sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Very simple thing to do is make sure when your employees are not busy, you're keeping them busy. Get them out on the sales floor. It doesn't do you any good if they have time to sit around and do nothing. A lot of statistics show that employee shrink grows when employees have nothing else to do but stand around. There's idle time. So make sure that you have a policy and procedure in place that when you're not busy, your employees are fronting your store, facing your store. They're outside, not physically outside the store, but they're out within the customers visiting, asking if the customer needs help. It's critical to get them from behind the counter where all the money is and get them into the store so they can be part of your inventory control tasks or policies. Number three, again, a very simple thing. Keep your storage areas locked. I'm always shocked, even to this point, how easy it is for me to walk into people's back rooms, how easy it is for when I walk into their offices. It's very common that we don't even lock our offices. It's also very common that we go to places and their safes are open and their office is open. And I'm always shocked about how many vendors are allowed in the store at one time, how many vendors are allowed in the back rooms, how many vendors are allowed in the offices. The manager's doing the invoice as an example. He's checking it off while sitting in his office, safe open, and the vendor is inside. So inventory storage areas locked, offices locked, having a focus on security is critical. Cigarettes, electronics in those areas, many of our members count those products, but they're not locked up in any secure way. They'll lock it up on the counter, right, because they're concerned that somehow someone is going to steal their merchandise from the sales floor, but they won't have the back room locked or the back room secured. Or again, your UPS man, Federal Express, it doesn't matter who, vendor can come in and out of your back room with absolutely no challenge or why you're back here. If you're not going to lock those areas, at a minimum, you should have a policy in place where someone from your organization is going to the back room with those people when they are back there. I know that takes money, and I understand that there's a cost involved with that, but it's critical to understand that these are pieces of the puzzle where you're losing money. It could be, in this case, just hard inventory or faking returns or whatever it might be that is going on in the back room. But you need to make sure that you're locking those areas, securing those areas, and again, having a policy and procedure in place to ensure that this is not happening without some sort of supervision. Number four, you might look up in the little corner and see a picture of some security cameras. I find it really fascinating that folks will spend countless hours looking at their video cameras and never address anything with their employees. I think it's critical that if you do have a video camera system in place, digital nowadays, that you find something positive that someone's done and that you address it. We all know that in our stores, our employees are going to talk amongst one another, talk to one another. And the best way for your employees to know that you are looking and you're identifying things is to address it, but not always negative. The more positive things you address, it's a much, much bigger positive impact, I believe, on shrink control than the negatives. So every night, or when you come in the morning, try to look at just a few seconds of some employee doing something good and reference that to them. Before you know it, your employees will be, again, speaking about how much that you're looking at the videos, you're checking things, and it'll be a positive, not necessarily a negative. And again, you don't have to spend 2 or 3 hours trying to find someone stealing. Employees who steal, as most of you on this call know, are very, very good at doing what they're due. And it's very difficult to catch them stealing. So if you can put preventive measures in place, again, as we referenced, controlling, preventive, trying to get an understanding of how you can get that number less as a percentage of your sales is where the real focus should be placed on. So again, spend a little bit of time looking at your videos and then addressing it the following morning with your employees. And you can do that throughout the day. You don't have to sit in the office for 5 hours looking at the video. People don't make money in the office. You make money on the floor where the rubber meets the road, where people are buying and conversing and the action is taking place. But a little bit of time in the office, look at what's going on in your business, and then addressing those items is critical to improving shrink control. Number 5, cash audits. Old school, for those of you that have on the call that have been around for 30 years or so like I have, this was a common thing that we did in our stores. With some of the new modern equipment, a lot of us have kind of forgotten about the importance of random cash audits. It's very, very critical to let your employees know that at any given time when you or a manager pop into that store, that you may actually pull that till and count it down right then and there. Depending on who you listen to, which expert, folks steal between $100 and $200 a day, those that steal from us. Granted, some of those higher numbers are from very, very busy locations, but even if they're stealing $50 a day in cash out of their register and covering it up through either fake refunds or fake returns, which are kind of the same thing, item corrections and so forth, it's still money that's coming out of your pocket. And what's really critical when it comes to shrink control is if it's being covered through an item correction where an item is actually purchased and left your store, it's really a double whammy on your inventory because you no longer have the item to count and you also have no longer the cash, quote unquote, sale. So cash audits are a critical part of doing your business. A lot of the top operators that have shrink control in the 1% to 1.5% have very, very robust cash audit programs. They are auditing their registers a minimum 2 or 3 times a week, all at different times during the shifts. And again, it's not something that you have to do every single day. It just needs to be part of your robust shrink control program, just like checking vendors in properly, which we'll speak about in a minute, just like having your office locked, safe locked, and so forth. Just part of a robust shrink control program. Cash audits make a huge difference. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, being long on a register is not a positive. There are no customers out there that come and give you money. That's one of the critical things to remember about a cash audit. If you do a cash audit and it's long, you've caught somebody doing something inappropriate. Maybe they did or didn't mean to steal from you, but they still failed to ring something up. That's one of the biggest misnomers. A lot of us will do a corrective action on an employee who's short. A lot of us will maybe terminate someone who's lost money. But we won't think twice about writing someone up if they're $20 long or they're $50 long or $2 long. In many cases, we never even address that issue. So, excuse me, random cash audits, critical. When your cashiers are long or zero, that's another thing I failed to mention. If you do a cash audit and they're on the penny, ladies and gentlemen, again, depending on your system, you may have a problem. If you've got an older register system and every single time someone, you count their till down and they're always 100% zero, you may potentially have a problem. And again, none of this indicates that you do. What it does indicate is there's an opportunity to do an investigation, to ask them questions, to challenge what you're seeing, to verify that you do not have a problem. All right, daily counts. So one of the things I notice that's very, very common is our folks in our industry, we do a lot of different counts. We'll count cigarettes, we'll count DVDs, we'll count lottery, entertainment, and so forth. And in most cases, we do nothing with that information. It's just like, again, if the posted speed limit is 65 miles an hour on the interstate, and there are police officers all over the place, and you drive 65 every single day, and you never get pulled over, that's one thing. If you drive 80 miles an hour and you never get pulled over, all of a sudden you'll start thinking, well, you know what? There's no ramifications for speeding because I never get pulled over. The consistency for inventory control is, again, another piece, as I referenced earlier, that has a big positive impact on controlling shrink. So if you're going to count something, do something with the count. So don't make your people count cigarettes and you're missing a pack every single day and don't address it. Don't have your folks go out and do an electronic count or a DVD count and then don't address the issue. All that does is send the message to the people that are stealing that it's okay to do it. Number two, you're not checking it. Number three, they won't get caught. But also another side of this is it creates a huge, huge demoralizing situation for your employees that are trying to do the right job. So again, if you are counting your cigarettes every shift and Susie is counting it for the prior person to verify and it's short, and it's short, and it's short, and every single time Bob gets to come back to work even though it's short, sooner or later Susie will do two things. She'll either quit or she'll start joining in the theft piece. So if you're going to count something, please make sure that you address it. Otherwise, don't waste your time and energy and don't count it. And that's really the fact. Deploy that labor differently. Use that labor instead of counting inventory with no consequences to the results. Apply that differently. You'll be a much happier person and you'll be more profitable. So don't waste your time on counting stuff you're not going to take action on. So checking in vendors again. How many of us let multiple vendors in our stores at one time? How many of us check vendors in the office? How many of us check them in the back room? How many of us check them next to their own merchandise? Vendor check-in process and procedures are critically important. It's very, very important, again, as part of your robust shrink control program, that you have a very solid and easy to understand vendor check-in procedure policy. If you're letting, again, your vendors do their own check-in, you're fooling yourself. You've got a problem. If you're letting vendors, as an example, check in their merchandise next to their own products, you probably have a problem. If you're allowing vendors to count things in multiple ways, 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, 14, 16, 20, you have a problem because they're going to be counting over. If you allow the same people constantly to check the same vendors in and you're allowing that vendor to leave gifts or leftovers or returns to them, you might have a problem. And again, none of this other than the false counting do I say is a sign of a problem, but you have to start addressing it. You have to be cognizant that after the theft from employees, which again, depending which expert you listen to, is 80 to 90% of all shrink, vendor theft is usually the second highest on that list. So checking vendors in, having a policy and procedure that controls the influx in and out, how they do their returns is critical. Most folks that ask me what I would recommend as far as the policy and procedure for check-in, an example would be make sure that your the vendors do the credits first, and they leave with the credits, and they give you a credit slip that you verified, and then they come back in and do their, excuse me, and put in their merchandise and so forth. But do not let vendors check themselves in. Do not let them have free access to your business. That is critical of an error. Number 8, spot check invoices, again, something I see on a regular basis when I'm in the field, where a vendor will make a mistake on an invoice and then make the correction right then there on the invoice. Terrible decision. If you think about the hostess guy or the hostess gal that's coming into your store and 200 or 300 other stores a day, and how many invoices he or she does, there's got to be a reason why they made a mistake. When you've done that for 10 years and you've written 3, 4, 5, 6,000 invoices, it's hard to believe that you'll have a vendor come in and consistently have problems with their invoices. So those, again, are signs. Doesn't mean there is a problem, but that's why it's so critically as a manager and owner to spot check things. The other thing about it is accountants, right? Don't fool yourself that an accountant can't be stealing from you. Don't fool yourself that certain folks that are doing the invoices can't be creating fake invoices. We've had incidents with members where folks have been managing their ATMs for them, where the travel center is actually putting the money into the ATM. They own the ATMs. We had a situation a couple years ago where we had a member that their accountant was stealing $180,000 a year, $180,000 a year. Another example I can give you, just recently, there was a monument company in Pennsylvania. You might have heard that the cashier, Cynthia Mills, over a 16-year period, sold $9.5 million from this organization. $9.5 million. Something more close to home, I'll share just a quick example where my son has an apparel company. We moved it to an online program where we no longer had the inventory, so we weren't inventorying shirts. But his bookkeeper, accountant, administrative assistant still submitted an invoice for over $2,000 for that particular month, even though there was absolutely no inventory. There should have been no charge. Brought that to my son's attention. He's like, oh, no, she just made a mistake. Later on, a couple months would go by, and then we would found out that for the last 10 years, she had been popping us for $2,000 a month. So just a fresh set of eyes. I just got involved for just a month to help do this setup. Fresh set of eyes looking at the business. Whammo, there was something terribly wrong. So just 3 examples of why spot checking invoices, looking for mistakes obviously we do it every day when we're doing our invoices, but it's good to have someone come in there and spot check those invoices. Very, very, very important. And again, the whole invoice process when it comes to a vendor, how it's handled, how it's corrected. Critical to controlling your shrink. Number 9, here's just a real simple one we threw in here, using clear trash bags. So as part of our training, sometimes in stores, we show managers and employees how simple it is to steal merchandise out of a store. So if you are still using the dark-colored trash bags, you're making a terrible mistake. And if you're not checking trash bags, the example would be that when you go to a Macy's or Dillard's or even most retailers now, folks that work in the perfume and cosmetic departments are required to have clear bags. They're not doing it because they are trying to be tough on these people. They're trying to create a program where they see everything that leaves their store. They understand what's going out in their own personal bags. Clear trash bags are the same exact way. So if you have clear trash bags, there's less of an opportunity for people to put stuff in them and take them to their cars. And secondarily, you want to make sure you are checking trash. So if you don't have a trash program where they bring the trash to you and you verify it before it goes out to your dump, you are probably losing merchandise. The last piece of this I would say, it has nothing to do with clear trash bags, but if your 11 to 7 shift is driving a 370Z Nissan 2018 model and they're parked next to the dumpster, you probably have a problem. Because most people are not going to park a $50,000 car right next to the dumpster unless they plan on going into the dumpster later. So just keep that in mind. All right, receipts. Old-fashioned, there's certainly a cost to receipts, ladies and gentlemen, but as part of your cashier register program, if you get your cashiers in the habit of counting change back properly, handing out receipts, asking leads to put merchandise in bags. That's going to reduce your shrink. Now, granted, as I referenced, there's a cost to invoices, but it's critical that you ask at a minimum to the customer want a receipt. Get your cashiers in the habit of, again, not putting the money in the register until the transaction's completed, counting money back the old-fashioned way, handing out a receipt, asking if the customer would like the product put in a bag. These are all policies and procedures that are easily viewed from a register camera or from a security camera system. You can see if people are following that procedure and policy. And when they're not following that policy and procedure, it's a simple issue to get addressed. And it really helps you avoid some of the quick change artists that come aboard, where if you're not familiar with a quick change artist, is someone who comes in who's looking to steal cash from you, and they make multiple transactions all at one time with the cash register open with your cashier. They befuddle your cashier, who ends up giving too much money back. But make sure that you've got a register procedure in place. If you'll notice anything out of today's conversation, we're up to number 10. We're talking about a lot of procedures and policies. Again, you don't have to write an entire manual on shrink control. You just have to have some very common sense programs in place to help you avoid shrink loss. So register receipt again, take the money, don't put it in the register, count the change back, close the drawer, give the receipt, ask if you want the product, and thank them for shopping and coming back and being a loyal customer. But again, providing receipts is the start of that. So this is really critical. Don't allow cashiers to keep coins, other types of markers next to your registers. If you're not familiar with how a marker works, most folks that are stealing from you are not ringing up merchandise, or they're refunding, but most of them don't ring stuff up because they have a knowledge of what a lot of the items in your store cost plus tax. They'll tell a customer that'll be $1.06 or that'll be $1.10, and the customer gives the money, and either their register is already open because they have disabled the register key open too long, or you don't enforce that policy and they put the money in the register. So again, if you enforce the policy of giving receipt, you can avoid situations like this. But markers, they leave on the top because a penny might mean they need to pull $1 out. A nickel may mean that they need to pull $5 out. A quarter may mean they need to pull $25 out of the register. Again, going back to why we want to do cash audits, so if you go in the middle of the day and you pull Bob's register and he's got 25 extra dollars, don't be surprised if he's got some markers on his counter. It could be something as simple as how he arranges the 5-hour energy. Each 5-hour energy put on his register represents $5 he or she has to pull out. It might be something as simple that he or she is using paper clips. So a large paper clip was $5 I got to pull out of my register before the end of the day, or a small one is $1. All these types of things are real true, not anecdotal, but real true things that are happening in your stores often on a daily basis that you're not cognizant if, again, you don't have a policy and procedure in place for doing cash audits, for doing, as I referenced, the spot checks on invoices, or having a register policy procedure in place. So if you are someone whose register looks like the one that you see in front of you, you should be a tad concerned because there's a lot going on at that register, and there may be an opportunity for someone to take something. And as I referenced on the other items before we get to the last 12 points, is none of this means you do have a problem when you see these types of things happening in your store. But you need to investigate it. It's the lack of investigation that creates these $50,000 and $60,000 a month shrinks. If you are not doing a regular monthly inventory or quarterly or whatever your company requires, if you're not checking on the inventory, if you're having your own store managers count your inventory, you're probably not showing that you have a problem, or you're not aware of a problem. But it's always funny, as soon as companies go from where they counted it themselves to handing it over to Regis or someone like that, a professional company. The first time they get a bad shrink, they blame it on the counters. That's the first, oh, those counters don't know how to do it. There's never a challenge to, well, maybe we've just been doing it wrong, or we've been, covering up shrink for the last X amount of years, and this is actually a real count. So again, critical to make sure you're addressing the issues that you see, because in many cases where there's smoke, where there's these identifications, there is a problem. So our last one is drive-offs. And you may say, well, that sounds strange in this day and age where we have RFID technology, or we have lot people, or we make all of our truck drivers or car customers pay before they come in. It's still commonplace. I still run into it quite frequently where someone has said the truck has left without paying. And I always push back, well, do you investigate that, or do you just immediately assume, okay, that happened, that's part of doing business? I would strongly suggest that anytime you have a drive-off, anytime whether it's diesel or gas, you address those issues. Like we talked about on some of these others, you should have a policy in place to address it. And it very well may be a legitimate drive-off. But if you just assume it's legitimate without investigating it, you're fooling yourself. So again, if I am working your register on the 3 to 11 diesel, and me and Bob are going to go out partying and we need an extra $400 to hit the clubs at the night, the easiest things for us to do is say there's a drive-off, especially if we know that your company doesn't have a policy or a procedure to address that. So again, if you are one of the few travel centers out there that does turn on the diesel pumps for the customers, do you go out there and verify the company name? Do you verify the plate? Do you verify those types of things? And do you make that a policy? Again, it doesn't mean that the driver won't drive off. It doesn't mean that legitimate drive-offs don't happen. But in most cases, they're not legitimate, and they just don't get addressed, or they're the fault of a cashier for whatever reason. Again, can't control if someone comes with a fake or stolen credit card. I understand those types of things certainly happen in our industry, but please address issues. And wrapping this up very quickly, I would want to emphasize to everybody on this call, and there's quite a few of you, get in the habit of addressing issues as they happen. If you see someone eating popcorn and you have a grazing policy, grazing meaning they're not allowed to be eating while they're on the job, the popcorn out of your popcorn machine, address it. Don't let it build up. Address it immediately. And that doesn't mean you terminate that person, but if that's your policy that it's not allowed, address it. Make sure you are doing cash audits every once in a while. Make sure you are addressing drive-offs. Make sure you are checking vendors checking them in properly. With all of the emphasis and energy we put on trying to make more margin dollars from our vendors, more margin dollars from the price of fuel, more margin dollars by cutting this or cutting that, if the same type of energy was placed on controlling your shrink or managing your shrink, it will have a huge positive bottom line impact on your business. Absolutely huge. So with that, we're almost done. So as I referenced, shrink management it's just that, just as it says on that. It's about controlling it, okay? It's controlling the loss. It's controlling the errors and issues that are created by theft and error. Don't feel and don't ever believe you're not going to have shrink. If you're counting your own stores and you're not showing any type of shrink, you're just covering up a problem. Everybody has shrink, but the key thing is learning how to manage it. And ladies and gentlemen, that's really the key to success, learning how to manage shrink, learning how to control it, and addressing the issues as they pop up. And with that, we've got some questions that are popped up, I think. Is that correct?
We haven't gotten any questions yet, but while we're waiting, in case we do, I just wanted to remind people that we have a lot of shrink management articles, blogs, posts on our website. So if you go up to natso.com, there's a little search tool on the top right. Just pop in shrink there, and you can see a lot of stuff. And you can always reach out to Darren or me, and we can send them to you. Also, we're having another webinar, the Darren and Amy team, in June 22nd. It's Win at Truckstop Inventory Management, and we're going to talk about inventory management, how to do it, how to categorize, why it's important, what to do with that unproductive inventory. That's June 22nd, and you can register for that on our website. It's in the calendar, which again is in that kind of upper right-hand corner of our website. You can pop on there. You can see how to register. And we don't have any questions.
That's okay. I just got one quick thing before we all start hanging up, and there often is questions about cash control as it applies to shrink, such as we have lots of members now that are beginning to implement paid parking programs and so forth, or they may have other programs where they are collecting cash, such as they are collecting cash from their showers or collecting cash from their washers and dryers program. And like anything, ladies and gentlemen, as we just talked about, if you don't have some sort of log, if you don't have a policy or procedure in place of how that process should happen, you're fooling yourself. There was one situation recently where there was a change out at one of our member locations. The owners asked me to come out and spend some time with the new management, and all of a sudden, paid parking jumped up dramatically, the shower income jumped up dramatically. All these things were all of a sudden higher, much, much higher than the previous manager who had been running the store. And that new manager was getting all the accolades and so forth. But the real big difference between the two is that manager was not stealing and the other manager was. That was the plain simple fact. Nothing else really changed. Same number of trucks, same number of showers. Nothing really had changed to that point. But even so, the critical thing told the ownership group is get a procedure in place. What should the manager do when he or she counts these things down? Should they have a second person verify it? Should they only pull it and count it when you're in the store? Whatever that procedure is, whatever that policy is, get something in place and hold people accountable to that policy. Make sure that they are going to do what you're asking them to do, and you're checking it and you're addressing it when it's not done.
We do have a question. What is an average shrink?
So it's usually related to percent of sales, either retail sales or cost of sales. So my understanding and from my background is 1% to 1.5% is the goal that you should be shooting for from a retail or a cost standpoint.
Okay.
All right, so if any of you folks need any additional assistance or would like to get more deeper into shrink, please feel to reach out to me. Text me if you have my number, call me if you have my number, or shoot me an email. We're here to help you, and thanks for joining the call today.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
All right.